So hopefully my previous videos, I've been able to help you guys out with dealing with any uh, thoughts that you might be having that are troubling to you. And I can give all the tips in the world. However, unless we actually have a straightforward, structured way of dealing with these thoughts, then it's going to be a lot more difficult for us to deal with them when they do come up. And I like to think of thoughts in essentially two main categories. So, is it emotionally charged or not? And if it's not, chances are these are just thoughts you think of while you're daydreaming, or maybe they're just random thoughts that come up, and there's no real emotional component to it. So, these thoughts are not a concern because our body is not signaling that we are in danger or anything, right? So we can simply just redirect our attention to the present moment. However, if they are, then what we want to do, and this is going to be mostly negatively charged emotions, because those are the ones that are kind of telling us like, hey, like something's wrong, we're in danger, we need to do something here, right? So if it is, then we want to ask ourselves, have we spent X amount of time being curious about it, right? And X is usually an appropriate amount of time. So the example would be like 15 minutes, right? And I think this is important because we want to set a limit on this, because if we don't, then this is going to turn into chronic rumination and chronic worrying, and that can really start to inflict on our lives and affect our lives negatively, right? So pick an appropriate amount of time, whatever works for you, and then if you haven't thought about it, then simply write about it for 15 minutes or whatever amount of time you chose. And then from there, we want to ask, does this thought threaten our survival of the present moment, or is it relevant to your life right now? And if it isn't, then once again, this is kind of a useless thought, and we can simply redirect our attention to the present moment, or we can use self-regulation techniques such as meditation or any sort of exercises or breath work or any other types of journaling maybe that are useful. We can do that there. However, if it does affect the present moment, your survival in the present moment, or if it's relevant to your life now, then what we want to do is ask ourselves, what are all the options? And then we list out all of them. What are all the different things that we can do about this thought, right? And the situation it relates to. And then after that, this is an important one, I think, in terms of my long-term well-being and not just short-term discomfort. Will this help me, right? Because some of the options might seem very daunting, very scary, right? However, a lot of the times, this is simply just short-term discomfort, right? So we need to be able to recognize, hey, is this just a short-term discomfort that will actually, in the long term, lead us to being happier and better? Or is it simply just, or is it actually an option that is bad and will cause us harm in both the short and long term, right? So we want to be able to differentiate between those two. And if it is something that is bad in the short term and long term, we'll then go back and reassess the options, right? And then once you've found one that you have that is, beneficial to the long term, because that's what we want to focus on, then lastly, you want to ask yourself, has the option that you have chosen actually abusive or harmful to anyone? And if it is, then go back and assess other options. And if it isn't, then you're good to go and you can do it, right? And by the end of this, you should have been able to effectively and appropriately deal with any sort of thought you may have been having. And I like this model because we're not just completely ignoring our thoughts and stuffing them away, right? We're taking the time to think about them, but at the same time, we're setting that limit so that these thoughts don't turn into chronic rumination and don't take over our lives. And it also keeps us in check, and it makes sure that we are doing the right thing, and it also makes sure that we aren't inflicting harm or causing any sort of abuse towards anybody. So anyways, I hope you guys found this process useful. I will probably do this up in a Word document for those of you who maybe can't read it properly or who just simply want a copy of it, right? And I think that can be very useful because once you start having these negative thoughts, you can quickly refer to this and then process it effectively. And we can feel good knowing that we are doing the very best we can to deal with these thoughts. And yeah, anyways, I hope you guys found this useful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.